Testing 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. If I could get you to make your way to your tables now so we can get things underway. I know a lot of you would be eager to catch up after probably not seeing each other for quite some time. Being our first event of the year, there will be plenty of time to catch up and chat and network a little later in the afternoon. So hopefully you all know where you're supposed to be sitting by now, otherwise you might have to head back outside and check the table allocations. All right, ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome to our first luncheon of 2022. Of course, it is our annual market outlook, which we'll get into very shortly. Tim McMillan is my name. It's my great pleasure to be back as your MC again for your first event here in 2022. I'll ask you before we go any further, please, to switch your mobiles to silent. No need to put them away. We're all grown-ups here, but if you could please just turn them to silence so you're not that person. I'd like you to join me in welcoming up to the stage Kim Collard from Coolbardie.
Thank you very much, Tim, and I'd like to begin by acknowledging the WA Mining Club this afternoon for following correct Aboriginal protocols in acknowledging the traditional custodians whose land we gather upon this afternoon, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. I've been bestowed a great honour this afternoon, and that is to be able to represent Ngandema Gamanga, my ancestors, my grandmothers and grandfathers. I take that responsibility very, very seriously and feel very honoured to welcome everybody, as Tim said, to the first WA Mining Club Luncheon here at Optus Stadium. As traditional custodians, our role is to look after you, to care for you, to nurture you, and as a result of that, we're leaving the capable and competent hands of the WA Mining Club, Optus, and all those involved in organising today to look after your every need. Sakeka won your Budaran Bidia, Mamaka Yok Kuling, Optus Stadium, February WA Mining Club Luncheon. Hello and welcome to many leaders, ladies and gentlemen, to Optus Stadium for the first WA Mining Club Luncheon. Nuningini Whadjuk Whadjuk, we're sitting on Whadjuk country. Ngandema Gamanga, Balanjan Bala, Nijinumrajer, Kora, Nitingai, Nijinumrajer. I said to you, our grandmothers, our grandfathers' feet have travelled this land for thousands and thousands of years, and it's a track to our ancestors that we still continue to follow today. Ngandema Gamanga, Balanjan, Europe, and Bullaran, Mamaka Yako Datyan, Optus Stadium, Market Outlook, Luncheon, WA Mining Club. Our ancestors' eyes are very, very happy to see many people come, sit, think, and indeed to celebrate and to listen to the panel discussion today on Market Outlook at the Optus Stadium. Barbary and Nijinunga Puja, Wildman, Balan Wajja Quell Swan River, Nijagan Quell, Darby Barbary and Nijinunga Puja, Wildman, Balan Wildman, Nijinunga Puja, Nijawajja Puja. I say that our God, our Creator, is the rainbow serpent of the wild. Behind us in this beautiful backdrop is the Derby Yurikan, you call the Swan River. It's one of the resting places and creation sites of our God, the great rainbow serpent of Waggle, and today she looks over us and protects us like an eagle, whilst you're Noongar country, whilst you're Whadjuk country. So once again, can I just conclude by thanking the WA Mining Club for following correct Aboriginal protocols. Today, theme is Market Outlook, and of course, with the 3rd of March looming, there's some wonderful discussions on the panel this afternoon about post-COVID-19. I have the privilege and honour of knowing one of the speakers today, Nick Ivory. Nick and I were part of the Fellow of Leadership WA in the 2008 cohort. So, Nick, wonderful to see you again. And so you have a wonderful afternoon and welcome.
Thank you very much, Kim. Always a pleasure to have you at our events here at the WA Mining Club. I mentioned keeping your phones out, folks. If you haven't joined the WA Mining Club's LinkedIn page as yet, please do so. You'll be joining over 13,000 others who've already done that to date. We welcome also this afternoon our life members Vic Bullow, Neil Watson, Michael Hebden, Mike Cipatelli, as well as our past president Damien Quayle. Also with us this afternoon are some VIP guests from our partners, our sponsors and our supporters. I'll go through them in a little detail in just a moment. Also want to particularly welcome our new members who are joining us this afternoon as well. The names are just on the screen there. So welcome to the club to those people listed there. Particular welcome to those who are actually in the room with us this afternoon. So to this afternoon, pleased to have some special guests here today, and I'd like to make special mention of our sponsors. Firstly, Axis Group International, which provides global procurement and supply solutions for mining projects and operations that drive down costs, expedite lead times, ensure security of supply, manage quality, mitigate risk, and ensure ESG compliance. Celebrating 20 years, they've worked with project owners and EPCMs on 6 continents to support their global procurement and supply. I'm sure they've had a very, very interesting year. At Dassault Systems, they harmonise products, nature and life for a more sustainable world. In life, there are no rehearsals, and their 3D experience models simulates and evaluates the impacts of real-world experiences. So thank you for your support as well. Also, Paramount Earth Moving, founded in 2015 by a young entrepreneur, Sean Tilley, starting with just a small Komatsu excavator. Sean has built Paramount into a fleet of over 250, with a strategy of supplying late-model, low-hour equipment to the civil construction and mining sectors. Paramount is a business built on a strategic business plan and having the right people in support. So thank you to our sponsors for today's events. Our partners and major sponsors are incredibly important to us as well, so would you please join me in thanking the following organisations: IGO, Evol LNG, Grounded, Goldfields Australia and the Minerals Council of Australia. Also want to acknowledge our affiliate partners, AusIMM, and we'll hear more from what they've got coming up from Nat in a moment, Miners Promise and Osmine. And thank you to our major sponsors as well, Fleetco and Fire and Safety Australia. Thank you also to our table sponsors. Their names are listed on the screen. So let's have a round of applause for all of the sponsors I've just mentioned there. Thank you very much. We will, as always, be announcing our door prize winners a little bit later on. And given that it's now 2022, you don't have to throw your business cards in the bowls on the table. We are moving with the times. We have an app now, which is going to randomly draw our winner a little bit later on. All right, let's hear from our president now, Nat Taylor, her first address for the year. Thanks, Nat.
Thanks, Tim. Welcome, everyone. We've successfully made it to 2022, and I'm so pleased that we are actually able to meet in person this month. Since our last event, which as many of you will know was the highly successful St Barbara's Day Luncheon in December, the committee has been working hard to develop our plans for this year and navigating, as we all are, the issues of COVID-19 and its impact on our businesses and our personal lives. Our luncheon series will be finalised this week, and we are looking forward to showcasing a range of projects and highlighting topical issues that are important to us all. We can't do it all, though. There are so many topics that we can bring to you, but there are only 12 months this year, and every year. Our survey, which will be coming out in the next few weeks, will be asking you what you want, so I encourage you to complete it and help us frame our program over the next couple of years. Our annual general meeting is being held at the March Luncheon. I've been asked to see if I can break Neil Watson's AGM record. Neil, I think it was it 11 minutes? 7 minutes. Oh, I don't know if I could do that. Let's see how we go. Nominations for the committee are open. So if you want to contribute to a hard-working and dedicated committee, we are ready to receive your application. But applications are closing tomorrow, so make sure you do it today. If you'd like to know more, please see one of our committee members. If I could ask our committee members to actually stand so we know where you are in the room, so if people are interested, they can approach you, please. Whilst they're standing, I'd also like to say a big thank you to Yella McGrady, who previously was a Young Professionals Committee member and on our committee, and who's stepping up into our casual vacancy on the committee and helping with the scholarships program. He is also up for election at the AGM. Thanks. We welcome a new associate partner this year. AusIMM and the WA Mining Club are collaborating on a range of events and initiatives. And we are so pleased to see Alison Muir and their guests here with us today. We'll hear more about the fabulous International Women's Day Luncheon later. I'm also pleased to announce that our high school engagement program, STEM United, will be running in 2022. Now in its fourth year, STEM United program is aimed at promoting future careers by introducing thousands of Western Australian Year 9 students to the world of STEM, Industry 4.0 and the future workforce, which is so paramount in our years today. Despite COVID-19, STEM United continued to grow last year with over 4,000 students reached and a record number of high schools joining the program. Alongside returning gold partner, Ruck Mining, we welcome Danf Tools and Silver and John X as bronze partners respectively. Our thanks to these organisations and to Greg Miller, CEO for Ruck, Sam Murphy, Managing Director for Danf Tools, and David Blythe-Wood, Managing Director at John X, for their support of the program. Our kids are the future. As per previous years, the delivery of STEM United program will be carried out by our education partner STEM Smart, previously FireTech. If you're interested in becoming a partner for this program and help inspire the workforce of the future, please contact our events manager Cassandra Brennan or see Andrea Conte for more details, who's sitting at table 7. Our first Young Professional event is coming up next month. So if you're a young professional in the room or have young professionals working in your organisation, please book in to attend. These events have a great energy and the topics are always interesting and thought-provoking. You don't have to be a young professional to attend these events either. So if you find the topic of interest, please come along. Whilst I'm on this subject, we want to have more young professionals in the room. We can't have a future mining industry if the future leaders are not part of the conversation. Please think about bringing someone from your company or your network who may want to start that journey. We've also got our Emerging Leaders program, which helps them to develop and mentor with some of our future leaders as well in the room. If you would like to know more, please see one of our committee members. One of our life members, Evan Biggs, is not well at the moment, and we are definitely missing him at the luncheon today. Evan, I am sure you're watching, so all the very best to you. This year is WA Mining Club's 50-year anniversary, and we are going to be reflecting on our journey each month. If you have been a member for many years and would like to contribute to the discussions, please come and see me at my table. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you very much, Nat. Just before we break for main course, ahead of our panel discussion this afternoon, we of course encourage you to practice safe COVID behaviours here, and if that means hand sanitizer, this is for you, Florence. This is a brilliant new product called Kalina Kaya. It comes courtesy of Florence Drummond, who is no stranger to the WA Mining Club, and certainly this stage. She's on table 16, and it actually smells great. Some of those hand sanitisers you use, and let's be honest, we're going to be using gallons of it in the next few months. Some of them smell really bad. This one doesn't. So I encourage you all to sample it. And if you want to speak more about getting some of this product at your place of residence or place of work, then go and see Florence on table 16. Our market outlook is coming up right after we break for main course, so I'll leave you alone while you enjoy that, and we'll be back with more very soon. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you're all enjoying your main course. If you're still going, then please keep going. But it is now time to get our panel discussion underway, which we will be doing right now. Before we invite our speakers up to the stage, I'll ask you again, if your phones are out, jump on our Q&A portal, Slido. I'm sure many of you have used Slido before. So if you'd like to participate in the discussion more actively this afternoon, ask a question or endorse someone else's question, then head to slido.com, no AU, just slido.com. The code that it will ask for that you need this afternoon is WAMC Feb 22, as it appears on your screen there. That'll take us into the portal for this discussion this afternoon, and you can take it from there. So we come now to our regular locked-in event that we start off every year with, our Market Outlook, a snapshot of the last 12 months and some thoughts on what might be facing us in the next 12 months, which is going to be interesting because often we don't even know what's going to happen tomorrow. But anyway, we're going to do our best. So I'd like you to join me in welcoming our panellists to the stage this afternoon. Firstly, Nikki Ivory, who's a partner with Deloitte Financial Advisory. Nikki leads the financial advisory team in WA and is a WA mining leader. She has over 20 years professional experience in Australia and in South Africa, providing valuation advice, including independent expert reports and other non-public valuations. She's also advised clients on the buy and sell side of transactions with a focus on the resource industry and companies that service the resource industry. It just so happens as well we have this on your desk, on your tables here as well today. Courtesy of Deloitte, their regular Tracking the Trends report is out, so if you'd like to download their report, just grab that flyer there and scan on the QR code there in the bottom left corner, and that'll take you to that. Or you can just hear the pearls of wisdom from Nikki up on the stage here this afternoon. Our next panellist is Liam Twigger, Deputy Chair and Executive Director with Argonauts. Liam has over 30 years of experience in the fields of investment banking and corporate finance. He is not only Deputy Chair and Executive Director with Argonaut, also the Chairman of SolGold, Chairman of London Metals, and Executive Director, as I mentioned, of Argonaut, also a member of the Board of Governors at St Mary's Anglican Girls' School, no less, which is probably your most interesting role of all of those, is it, Liam? Thank you again for being part of our panel for this Market Outlook again in 2022. Natalia Streltsova is a non-executive director with a PhD in chemical engineering and as well global technical and leadership experience spanning technology, project development and corporate development roles in the minerals industry. In her executive career, she spent over 10 years in senior technical and corporate roles with mining majors Western Mining Corporation, BHP and Vale. In the last 10 years, since finishing full-time executive roles, her focus has been on non-executive board memberships and consulting. Dr. Streltsova is currently a non-executive director with ASX-listed Ramelius Resources, Western Areas Limited and Neo Metals, and a chair of Australian Potash Limited as well. So I'll be getting to as many of the Slido questions throughout our discussion as I possibly can, time permitting. So don't be shy. If you do have a question that you'd like me to notice and hopefully put to one of our panellists, please do so. All right, I'm going to move over to the chairs now. Right, hopefully you can hear me okay on this microphone. Let's talk about forecast for the year ahead, and we'll obviously unpack some of these points in a little more detail over the course of the next 40 minutes or so. There are obviously going to be some challenges and a little bit of chaos in the next 12 months, but what do you think will be the important drivers of the market in the year ahead? Let's start with you, Nikki.
Okay, so I'll talk maybe a little bit about inflation. So we've heard a lot of talk that inflation is rising. Current headline inflation pressure is actually quite high in Australia. To the year to December, inflation was at 3.5%, so sort of well out of that RBA range of 2 to 3%. And we've heard anecdotally around the world, the inflation is really high, and we've seen pressure on interest rates around the world. So what does it mean in Australia? I don't know if anyone read the interview last week with Mike Henry, BHP, who talked a bit about inflation and how he thought it would be actually really good for BHP because they're so good at controlling their costs better than anyone else in the industry. And so inflation would, I guess, proportionately be good for them, which I thought was interesting because general consensus would be that inflation is not particularly good for the economy. And whether this inflation is going to be systemic or not is therefore an interesting question. It's mainly supply driven at the moment, this inflation that we're seeing. Sort of the back end of things coming out of COVID, and there are a number of factors that are causing that. We as a sort of Deloitte Access Economics view is that it's temporary and that it won't be overtaken by demand driven inflation, which is what Mike Henry was suggesting would come. But it really is important to watch what happens with wages. And so anecdotally, we all know wages are going up, everyone's poaching people and paying them more, but that's really at the fringes in our economy because most of our economy, 60+%, is under EBAs or awards, and they move much more slowly. They don't respond to these pressures that quickly. So our house view is that we won't see that flowing through into demand-driven inflation for a while yet, probably not seeing rate rises off the back of that into 2023. But that's not everyone's view. So I think that's one to watch because I don't think it's going to be great if there is high inflation for our industry.
Liam, key drivers for 2022?
We have a molecule crisis, and that's quoting Jeff Curry, who was the head of commodities at Goldman Sachs. Said, you name it, we're out of it. Whether it's gold, copper, nickel, iron, anything, we're out of commodities. There's a shortage of supply, and that sort of underwrites what we have in WA. We're blessed with having all these commodities. So I think going forward, we're going to be in great shape. The challenge with inflation is that no Western government has ever navigated the way out of an inflationary environment without tipping the economy into recession. And I don't think that's going to happen in the next 12 months, but ultimately that's what happens. We had it in the energy crisis in the 1970s, and then we had it in the late 80s after the crash, and Paul Keating had those words with the recession that we had to have. So that's probably the only cloud on the horizon, but sort of under all circumstances, WA still shoots the lights out.
It's a decent-sized cloud, though, isn't it? Yeah. So are you saying that a recession is coming?
I think households are far better placed today than they've ever been to deal with inflation. So it might be delayed. House prices go up during times of inflation, so people are going to feel pretty comfortable and they'll continue spending. But ultimately, recessions are caused by increases in interest rates, and at some point, the governments can't help themselves. They overshoot and they'll tip the thing over. Okay. But it might be 18 months, 2 years away. We're okay for the next 12, I reckon.
We'll check in with you again at this event.
Got it.
Next year.
Got it.
Natalia, what about for you? What do you think will be the main drivers this year?
I think I would agree with Liam that if we're going to see some crisis, it's not going to be in the next 12 months. The commodity prices will stay high because the demand is not disappearing, it's actually increasing. And if anything, it's increasing at the pace which is way above what predictions were a year ago. So there is no real reason to believe that that's going to change. Well, I certainly, in terms of my view on being a technical person, I think I'm very keen to see what's going to happen with the gold industry and how the fact that we have a few interesting, big, strong, up-and-coming projects in Western Australia with refractory gold are going to develop. So this is the space that I'd be watching with interest.
We haven't mentioned at all the tensions going on in eastern parts of Europe at the moment and the threat of conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Do you see that being an ongoing factor as you look ahead to the next 12 months? I'd invite anyone to comment on that.
It's like something out of a James Bond set, isn't it? I mean, Dr. Doom, I mean, the way Putin's carrying on, I mean, you expect Daniel Craig to turn up at any moment and sort him out. He's
at very least got a bald cat somewhere.
Yeah, that's it. That's right. Daniel Craig or Nev Power in his helicopter.
Yeah.
But it's a big issue. And but I think we saw this takeover. We saw the Brookfield and Cannon Brookes takeover of AGL announced 2 days ago. $5 billion bid, $20 billion in funding behind them to bring forward a lot of the renewable energy projects. And so they've organised that in the environment with, potentially a world war. And I think the market's determined there ain't going to be a war. The West ain't going to fight. We're just going to hit them with sanctions. And it's a land grab by a sort of standover merchant. So I think we're going to bat on. So as much as it's an issue and a cloud, the gold price has gone up a little bit, but I think it's going to be business as usual. And I think that takeover, which is a reflection of market confidence, is the thing that I think we're going to see a lot more of that.
Okay. One of the themes of the last couple of years has been pressures on supply and just getting the bodies on the ground to do the jobs here in WA. Borders, we now know, are going to open in a matter of days. Is that going to ease that up?
So, the supply chain issues is not going away overnight. It's quite complicated. Obviously, COVID was the start of it, and there were sort of knock-on effects, and things have been slower to get back into production again, and ongoing, COVID issues. But there's also a shipping issue. And freight costs have gone up 5-fold since pre-pandemic levels. And getting ships to actually come to Western Australia, they've sort of been diverted to more profitable routes. So there are a couple of issues. It's kind of a bit of a gummed up chain at the moment. So I don't think that that's necessarily going to get resolved overnight, but obviously we still think it's temporary. So it'll impact on things for a while, but it'll flow out. And I think borders opening will ease the labour issue over time, as we're able to bring more people in.
We've seen a number of companies having to poach from within the state and throw money at staff to get them over, which is great for those employees who want a bit of a pay rise out of it. But are those days about to come to an end with the borders opening, Leah?
Oh, I hope so.
Natalia?
Look up.
You hope so?
It's tough, and it's tough on young people. Who are earning their stripes in an organisation, really need to spend 3 years, and before they even get to 12 months, they're being poached by the dollars to go somewhere else. And I suspect it will end in tears, and they haven't earned their stripes or done their apprenticeship. So it's probably those that are jumping ship a bit too early, and you can't blame them for the money that's being thrown around. So that's the unfortunate byproduct, but ultimately it'll settle down.
Natalia, those that you're in contact with, are they excited about the borders opening up next week?
Oh, absolutely. I'm number one. Because most of my family is overseas. I think in terms of the skills and labour market, it will take some time to resolve, because there will be people coming in and filling those critical positions that we need and that we crave for. But there will also be people who are going to say, okay, now I'm free, and they will leave. So for the market to come to balance, it will probably take a while.
Yep.
And I think one of our challenges with that is our image in the rest of the world. So we haven't really got a great image at the moment, because they see us as this lockdown North Korean fortress, all those things that have been thrown around. So is that an environment that you attract people to come and move here? So we're going to have to work on that.
Yeah, some of the language that gets used is quite extreme, isn't it? Some of the language around our relationship with China has also been pretty strong lately. In terms of the market impact from that, is there a distance between what happens in the market and what happens, in the halls of Parliament in Canberra? I mean, there's a lot of mouthing off as we build up to an election and political points to be scored. Is that just them mouthing off, or does it have a real impact in your world as well?
I think it does, absolutely. It's a very delicate balance, and while Putin's doing whatever he needs to do or he wants to do in Ukraine, you could see the Chinese potentially using that same distraction to try and exert more influence in our waters. And we've had the issues with the submarines. There is a lot of tension, and I suspect the Chinese may well be trying to pick a fight. It's very difficult times, and the world doesn't need that. So I think there is some substance behind it, and it doesn't take a lot when you've got helicopters and aeroplanes and ships coming in close contact with one another. It doesn't take a lot for someone to pull the trigger and something bad to happen, and then it escalates. So we've got to be very mindful, and I think there is some substance, and we need a steady hand and steady heads, and to see through the rhetoric and get on with the business of making Australia great.
Yeah, and we'll touch on the attractiveness of WA as a place to invest a little bit later, but at the moment that is part of the cloud that's hanging over this state.
But
the threat of
the
tension
mining
with
industry has
China.
actually been really good, though, at managing those relationships with China, sort of behind the scenes. And I think Corbis last year made this really good point. We need some statesmanship, leadership in this sort of delicate balance we're in with China. And it's really a bit lacking from our politicians. So maybe it's up to industry to step up and be that statesmanship, leadership.
Can we talk more about supply chain issues? It's been such a recurring theme over the last couple of years. You're saying it might take some time for that to ease up, to get that gum out of the machine, as you put it. When do you think we will see things get back to normal, whatever normal is?
So my crystal ball's a bit hazy on that one, Tim. Probably only later this year, I would think.
Later this year.
So it'll start getting better, but it's going to take a while. It's not an overnight fix.
Yeah, but
My experience, sorry.
There you go.
My experience with operating companies is actually that they have been reasonably well prepared. So when the issue has first come up, maybe close to 2 years ago, everyone has done a very thorough review of what the supply situation is, and they have prepared. So in terms of the impact on production, I don't think we've actually seen much of the supply issue impact. And where it really manifested itself was mainly when there is some particular more unusual problem arising on site, and it needs a piece of gear that needs to be brought from Europe or something else that is critical, and that was difficult. But other than that, in terms of normal operational day-to-day, I think the companies have demonstrated that they are very well prepared.
a question from the floor. Might be a good time to open it up to our questions on Slido. Nikki, this might be one for you. Do you foresee a market adjustment following this inflation?
I think the jury's out on whether inflation will rise up above the RBA range of 2 to 3%. As I said, it depends a lot on what happens with wage growth. So the RBA is taking a very cautious approach at the moment, watching that wage growth. It ticked up to sort of 2.3%, I think it was, in December. And there's a couple of industries, professional services, which is where I am, is one of them, construction, health services. You know, so there are a couple of industries where we're seeing that growth. Public sector ticked up a little bit. So they're keeping a really good watching brief on that, and will act, I think, immediately if they see it getting out of that range on a sort of a adjusted basis as the year progresses. So if we start seeing rate rises, then obviously that has an impact, because at the moment money's quite cheap. There's a lot of capital available for mining projects, expansions, etc. As soon as interest rates go up, that could change. And so it depends on what happens during the course of this year. We don't think it's going to pull out of that range, because we think there are drags in the Australian economy on wages growth.
Yep.
Despite all the anecdotal stuff we've talked about, graduates, doubling their salaries, etc. That's at the fringes. The bulk of our economy doesn't have that sort of wage growth.
Yep.
So on balance, we think it won't, but the cloud is there, I guess.
We'll wait and see.
Yeah.
The winning trade, the winning trade for the last sort of 15 years as interest rates come down is to buy the stock with the longest possible cash flow. So the tech stocks, things that have got 40 years cash flow, have been priced to perfection. And that's been a winning trade for the last 10, 15 years. Once interest rates start to come up, you start selling those, and now people are switching out of long duration stocks, and they're coming into commodities, and they're coming to mining stocks. So we're going to see this as the winning trade for the next 5 years. As interest rates go up, as people try and manage inflation, there'll be a correction in the tech stocks and the long end of the market, and it's going to pile into the short end, which is generally the mining stocks. And we're already seeing that at Argonaut.
Yep.
Money's coming in. So I think, again, we're brilliantly positioned.
Very good. Another question from the floor. With the significant short-term labour problem, does WA Mining believe more effort and finance should be allocated for the long-term survival of our industry?
Sorry?
I think it's asking how do we address the short-term labour issues in the sector. I think that's the gist of the question.
We could probably look to get people from Ukraine to come here. I think there'd be a bit of a queue.
With every problem,
they're very talented.
Yeah, that might just work. But I suppose maybe aside from just throwing more money at people, better training, I'm assuming this is what the question is pointing to. How do we address in the short term the labour crunch here in WA?
You've got to bring people in.
Just throw money at them, that's still the answer.
There's not enough. No, that's not throwing money at it. That's giving people opportunity from elsewhere where they don't have those opportunities. Our unemployment rate is ludicrously low here. We just don't have the people here to fill all the demand. So you have to bring people in, whether that's from over east, but they're having the same pressures. It's probably overseas migration again. You know, that has been almost zero for the last 2 years.
I think that, sorry Tim, I think that we've already been throwing a lot of money at trying to address the shortage. Our contract rates are at all-time high. The quality of contractors that we're dealing with is going down because they have no people to train people. Their salaries are going up in the opposite direction. I actually am very concerned because I think there are a lot of potential safety issues that are coming up from this environment where you actually have very green people being hired by contractors, and they can cause all sorts of troubles. So in the short term, I believe it is an issue that you can't quite close by throwing more money at it. I'm hoping that it's going to resolve itself and turn into a longer term issue of us all working together to upskill the industry and get more kids going into mining. And that's a separate topic altogether.
Oh, absolutely. One that's been touched on very many times on this stage. We might get into it in our next point that we're going to talk about here. As Nat mentioned earlier, the Mining Club celebrating its 50th anniversary in 2022. I'll ask each of you, if you had to tell the story of mining in this state over the last 50 years, it's tricky, but in a few short sentences or a couple of headlines, how would you tell that story, Liam?
Well, 50 years ago, WA's main exports, it was wheat and wool, and precious metals and iron ore was like 14% of our exports. That was in the 1970s. Now, 90% of our exports, it's precious metals, iron ore, oil and gas, and that transformation has just been unbelievable. And the infrastructure investment on oil and gas in the Northwest Shelf, what we have at our ports, has been incredible. So it's really been a transition from a farming or a wool and wheat economy into a full-blown sort of mining economy, and that would be my statement.
Yeah. Fair to say the industry's come a long way in many different ways in that time. So what's been the most notable advancement for you?
So as Liam said, mining was not our main industry, it was just taking off, but it was killing a lot of people. So between 1943 and 1970, there were 341 people who lost their lives in our mining industry, despite it being only 14% of our exports. And so between 1970 and 2000, that started shifting because it became a real focus. It was a cultural issue that had to be addressed. And the numbers between 1970 and 2000 were still high. 274 people lost their lives. But we've really seen that in the last 20 years shift significantly. There's still 65 too many deaths over that period. But when you contrast those numbers, by making this the number one priority in the industry and collectively working on solving it, we actually shifted the needle completely. And so that's a massive cultural shift that we managed to achieve. So to me, that's actually a very positive way of looking at the future, is that we've actually managed to achieve a seismic shift in one area.
Yep. Thank you.
Well, I think we shouldn't forget that mining industry has made a huge economic contribution over these 50 years, and it's continuing along the same line. I think WA is one blessed spot where we have huge surplus with the government, particularly from the mining industry now when everybody else is struggling. I think one thing that I want to touch on quickly is what's changed in the 50 years is fly in, fly out. It didn't exist for a long period of these 50 years, and it's changed the culture and how the industry is managed considerably. I mean, I wasn't here 50 years ago, but what I understand is that there was this strong culture of mining towns. There was a strong culture of skills residing where the mines were and where the processing facilities were. and that is not the case anymore. And through this change, I think what we've seen is probably shift away from verticalization, where the skills were available in the place, towards something that is less complex. It still has good margins. I think we're slowly seeing some of it coming back with IGO and lithium refineries and downstream processing hopefully coming back to Australia. And that would be a very good positive change.
Yeah. One of the things that the industry is celebrated for is the introduction of new technologies. Is this part of the story of mining in WA in the last 50 years?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, I sometimes complain that technology uptake is very slowly, slowly moving, and everybody wants to be the first to be the second and third, because that's the field where I spend a lot of years. But it's undeniable that technology has made a huge difference in the industry, in all spheres. And, without going into details, I think that's what is going to continue to happen. Technology uptake, particularly coming from cross-pollination of technologies coming from different industries. Defense, look at exploration techniques. Huge change coming from geophysics, geochemistry, and all sorts of other areas. So yeah, I hope that it's going to continue to go ahead and feed what we need in terms of power generation and power technologies and power costs that will drive more innovation. Well,
maybe let's flip that question around and look ahead to the next 50 years. I mean, it's hard enough to predict what's going to happen next week, isn't it? But let's have a go. At the next 50 years, do you think, where's the power, where's the energy going to come from is going to be one of the big challenges of the next 50 years?
Undoubtedly, because new technologies, whichever ones you think of, apart from IT, are probably driven by the cost of power and power availability. If we push for climate change, we need a lot of renewable power at reasonable cost. Because if it's not at reasonable cost, it's not going to be helping us. So I think a lot of change is going to come from policies and regulations that will assist in transitioning to affordable green power. Hydrogen is one side of it. I reserve my judgment on this because I think there is a lot of efficiency that's lost in the process. But I'm hoping that we'll have enough of that green power development to fuel other technologies.
Okay. Question from the floor at this point. Might be a good time to throw this one into the panel. Will the current interest in decarbonising mine sites stick and actually result in large-scale change in the mining industry? Who would like to have a go at that one?
It's going to be forced on us, I think. I think it's something that you have to do in terms of looking forward for the next 50 years. And we can see it already I've never seen employees come forward when they're looking to join a company, and they've never been more concerned about the purpose of the company than ever before. Like, what do you do? And societies are focused on fairness and equity and opportunity, and they've never been more focused on the environmental side and what are you doing to protect the environment in a very forceful manner. So it's never been a more difficult time, I think, to be on a board and to respond to your stakeholders, but it's been driven by a lot of shareholders and funds, and it's come right through the community. So unless you're at the forefront of dealing with this, you won't be able to attract the people. And whether you like it or not, I mean, a lot of companies are embracing it, but it's going to be forced on you.
Yeah. Education is going to be a big one over the next half century, you think, Nikki?
Yeah, and I think picking up on the point about attracting people, education and skills, the skills we're going to need going forward in a much more technologically evolved industry are very different to the skills we needed in the last 50 years. So they're much more diverse. It's not just the classic mining qualifications that you're going to need. You're going to need a lot more across the STEM sort of spectrum, technology, innovation, a whole raft of skills that probably don't even work in the industry at the moment. So how do you attract those? There are other companies far more sexy than mining. hiring those people? How do you get them to say, I'm going to invest my career in mining? So I come back to my pet topic, which is the image of mining. You know, we are doing a lot to try and change the image of mining, but it is still largely perceived out in society as dirty and dangerous. Dirty, not just physically, but also the carbon component. So how do we change that perception amongst school children, university students? And there's lots of good stuff done. I mean, we heard you talked earlier about some of the relationships that the Mining Club has with people doing amazing things with school children, but it still feels like it's at the fringes. We need to have an industry-wide concerted effort at changing that narrative, letting young people really genuinely believe that they can invest their career in mining.
Yep.
And I think that's going to be absolutely critical to attracting those skills. But there's another component to education, which is getting our people who run our industry, that cultural shift I talked about, that's part of the education is we need to be modern in a modern society. And our gender balance is a real issue. Society is 50-50. We are still, at best, I don't even think it's 80-20. I think that would be generous. And that causes all sorts of issues. It amplifies some of the issues we have in society because you sort of have, think of on site, you probably don't even have 20% of your workforce being women. So what does that lead to? Well, we know what it leads to. And we can talk about this sort of topic as well. But that's, to me, I really think there needs to be a shift on how we look at that as leaders in the industry.
Well, pleased to say I'm sitting on table 3 today with a table of all ladies over there. Hello, table 3. Which is great.
Jim, can I just add quickly to this? I think that it's kind of, I'm a half-full person, so I think that with the shift to more focus on circular economy, recycling, technology applied to mining, helping us to deal with supply of critical materials through new technologies, we are going to see younger people more interested in that because it kind of fits in with their desire to be involved in a space that creates a cleaner future. So I'm hopeful that that's what's going to naturally happen with time.
Yeah. One of the negative headlines, unfortunately, in the last year particularly, that goes to what you were saying there, Nikki and Natalia, in terms of the image of the industry has been around sexual assaults, general sexual misconduct in the industry. We've seen a parliamentary inquiry, we've seen new codes of conduct drawn up. Has the industry response to date been adequate? Has it been right? What's your position on that?
So, I mean, this is a societal issue. It's not a mining industry only issue. I mean, Grace Tame and Brittany Higgins don't work in the mining industry. One of them worked in politics and one of them was a student or a school child. And yet, they've amplified this conversation. So it's a societal issue, but it's amplified in mining because of this gender imbalance. When you only have tops 20% of people on site are women, and then you throw alcohol into the mix. I was reading some of the reports that that have come out recently, and there seems to be a theme there that alcohol has a big role to play in some of these sexual assaults or sexual harassment. So I really think we need to take a closer look at that potentially. But to answer your question about the industry's response so far, so what I'm seeing is a lot of education and training that's being rolled out so that people are aware of the issue, starting with senior leadership and cascading it down. And it's an awareness training. But that in itself is not going to be enough. It's a really good start, but it's a cultural shift that's needed. So we need to bring more women into the workforce, and we need to shift this sort of societal, cultural issue on our sites.
It's going to be over a long time.
It's going to take time.
Incremental shift.
Yeah.
Liam, when you see those headlines pop up, what's your immediate response to that? What's your gut response when you see those headlines, that come up quite frequently at the moment?
It's very frustrating. I guess it's right across society, but it goes back to the image in many respects of mining that, we do make change, but it's like the mining industry has this reputation. We ultimately do the right thing, but only after we've exhausted all other alternatives. We take a long time to get our act together. So it's frustrating, but I think it's good that it comes up. I mean, mining companies really are, I know a lot of them are still male-dominated, but they do reflect society. So you can't expect society to have issues and for them not to be present in mining companies, but now we've got a platform to raise it and deal with it in a really good way. And that it's not right, we need to fix it, and let's get on with it rather than it sort of being sort of just under the surface.
Yeah. Can we shift now to environmental issues? We talk a lot about social licence. It's another of those sort of catchphrases that comes up a lot. On the environmental side, how do you think the industry is tracking responding to those sorts of challenges? Have we learned the lessons of Juukan Gorge yet?
It's a really good question, and it's a difficult one. I think Rio Tinto got off very lightly with Juukan Gorge. They seriously damaged their own social licence to operate, but also damaged the licence to operate of every single person in the mining sector has been affected by what they did. And I had a read of there's a document called Never Again, which was prepared by the Parliamentary Inquiry, and it's worth, I mean, it wasn't illegal what they did, but when you look at the pathway and the decisions that they made and how they dealt with the PKKP, the traditional owners, it's just awful. The Juukan Gorge it was recognised by Rio Tinto as being one of the most important archaeological sites for Indigenous people in Australia. It was one of the most important. They even paid for a documentary to be done on Juukan Gorge. So they were under, I mean, there was 46,000 years of sort of ownership and constant use. They had plates that had been there for 30,000 years. They had a hair braid belt that was 4,000 years old. The DNA in that belt was still connected to the local community. And when they were looking at Juukan Gorge, they had 4 choices of redeveloping and accessing the iron ore, and 3 of them didn't involve blowing up the Juukan Gorge. But there's no evidence in that inquiry that they presented any of those 3 to the traditional owners. They just presented the one which had to blow it up. And when the traditional owners tried to make a media release to say we're against this, they were under a gag provision under the agreement that they had with Rio Tinto. And then the aftermath, it took weeks before Rio Tinto actually came out and apologised. And when they apologised for the sadness and distress. They didn't apologise for blowing up the gorge. That took another period of time and pressure before they actually then apologised for blowing up the gorge. And it's just an appalling thing. And we pick up the pieces. You know, the cost of, if you want to get an archaeological survey or get involved and negotiate with traditional owners at the moment, it's more difficult now than it's ever been, courtesy of what's just happened. And you can't negotiate and try and alleviate this in isolation. I mean, they've done a cultural survey, which we've now seen. I think Chevron have done a cultural survey. They didn't need to do a cultural survey to find out what was wrong with the company. It was in that bloody report that was done by the Parliamentary Inquiry. And you can't cleanse yourself by saying, well, we've done this survey, we've worked out our culture and we need to fix it. You need to embrace all of the stakeholders. And what we do well as a mining community, as juniors, you know, we manage stakeholders. We're great at negotiations, we look after our communities. With a lot of the junior miners, the mid-caps, the person who owns the store runs the store, and we live here. So we've got to live with those decisions. And between us and what, say, someone like Rio Tinto does, I mean, they're great miners, you know, they're great at logistics, they've got great access to capital. The solution is, in fact, between the two of us. And for them to think they've made a mistake, they apologise, they come out with a cultural survey, to think that they can do it in isolation is just wrong. And we've got a vehicle here, AMEC. Warren Pearce does an outstanding job. Why wouldn't Rio Tinto put some money into AMEC and let's come up with a solution so it really is never again? And it's a very sensitive issue, and I'm not here to sort of pay out necessarily on Rio Tinto. They're just the guys that got caught, and but it was pretty awful. It's pretty awful.
Might be hard to put the toothpaste back in the tube after that.
But it needs to be said, and I'm calling it out. It was
no, fair play.
Well done.
Fair play. I don't think there'd be many who would disagree with you in the room.
Do you think, Liam, the companies need to get smaller?
The companies need to get smaller.
The big companies need to get smaller to be able to manage these issues without referring to another office in another country and someone else making decisions.
Well, they just need to be connected. They need to have a better model for connecting with their community. And if you looked at Rio, they had all their directors in London and maybe one in Melbourne, nobody here on the ground. And they fixed that. So it does work, but you've got to work really hard. I mean, trying to get, Rio Tinto or the big companies to, to work with the communities is a bit like trying to, park an oil tanker on the Rottnest Island jetty. It's really hard. But we can do that. So I don't know what the model is, but I know you can't work out the solution in isolation with them going, we're the kings of the universe and we'll sort this out and we'll let you know. We're the guys that pick up the tab. And are we all going to have to do cultural surveys now and then get them audited? Because, that's the latest thing in the ESG. I'm not sure that's the answer. And I guess we as a community need to call it out that was wrong.
Given all that we've talked about the last little while, is WA going to continue to be an attractive place for investors, particularly international investors, to park their money in the next 12 months or so?
God, that's my theme song. So,
Sing it.
So if you want to be best in films, you go to Hollywood.
Yep.
If you want to be best in fashion, you go to Milan. If you want to be best in tech, you go to Silicon Valley. If you want to be best in mining, you come to Perth. The ASX raised more money for junior companies and more capital than any other exchange around the globe for the last 2 years. Last year, we had 106 IPOs on the ASX. There were like 6 in Canada. And 54 of those IPOs were in WA. So we have actually underwritten the next economic boom for Western Australia with those 106 IPOs. They're like little turtles heading towards the beach. A lot of them won't get there.
They won't all survive.
They won't all survive, but the ones that do will come up with some great discoveries. So, to employ people, to work in the centre of the universe, and that is Perth, where all the great ideas, the exploration initiatives, in terms of what we're doing with mining, this is the place you need to be.
Yeah.
So we are blessed here,
Yep.
but it's great. There's Milan, there's New York, there's Hollywood, and there's Perth.
Yeah, very good. With our little turtles. We did have a good question come in from someone who I think has probably been answered then, but how do we sieve good value from the dressed up mutton going into a strong commodity price environment in talking about the sheer quantity of IPOs? I think we've answered that with the turtles, hopefully. All right, we're getting the wind up here, so let's get now to the final question for this afternoon. Your top commodity picks for 2022. Would you like to go first?
Yeah.
Nikki?
So
What's your hot tip for this year?
I think it's still in the critical minerals space, given everything we've talked about today. So I would pick lithium and nickel.
Lithium and nickel, okay. Liam?
I'd say humility, not that that's a commodity, but nickel, yeah.
Nickel?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the one.
I agree, but I can add, I think there are a few commodities that are kind of flying under the radar at the moment, but they are very critical, and vanadium is one of them.
Vanadium?
So I think that vanadium prices are going to go up, and hopefully some of our struggling vanadium projects are going to actually be set up for the future to be productive. I think gold is going to do really well. Considering what's happening around the world and all the uncertainties. Yeah.
Yep, okay. I hope you all took notes there and got that down. Lithium, nickel, gold and vanadium, and other critical minerals. Thank you very much. Would you please thank our panellists this afternoon, Nikki Ivory, Liam Twigger and Natalia Streltsova.
I just wanted to say a quick thank you to the panel. As always, it's such a great topic to talk about and look at, especially for this year for us, for our 50th anniversary, what it's been like for the last 50 years, and then what it's going to look like for the next 50, with that crystal ball that's a bit glazed. But I actually called up my uncle to say, well, what was his take on what happened 50 years ago? And he said, well, in 1983, Bub, I used to work at the BHP refinery in Port Hedland, and we went to work in stubby shorts, singlets and jandals. Well, you guys call them, I think, flip-flops or thongs. Kiwi, don't hold it against me. But he said from that until now, and the hivers that we have to do and what our safety is in the workplace, as to Nikki's point, it has changed astronomically over the last 50 years. And it's a testament to what we've actually done in the industry as a whole and how we've actually been at the forefront to make sure that we're all held accountable for what we're doing in the industry. So it's going to be great to see how we actually move and change into that cultural shift that we need and to move on in the next 50 years. So thank you for actually bringing that up and talking about it. It's been a great topic.
many more.
You're excused, panellists. Thank you very much. I'm going to invite now Alison Muir from Oz IMM up to the stage to announce the winner of tickets that we're giving away this afternoon to the International Women's Day Luncheon, celebrating the achievements of women in mining at Oz IMM's International Women's Day event series in 2022, if Alison is here. So International Women's Day lunches will be held in 5 Australian capital cities in March, featuring presentations from high-profile speakers, sharing their inspiring personal stories, as well as networking opportunities to connect with peers and colleagues. There will be over 1,500 delegates expected to attend across that event series happening next month. And the Perth keynote presentation will be live streamed to a regional audience. So, Alison, hello and welcome. Tell us who our winner is.
Thanks very much, Tim, and thanks Cassandra and Nat for the opportunity to draw the winner of the door prize. So it's my honour to announce that the winner is John Paul Guy from MTQ. Okay, fantastic, thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, winners can stay where they are. We'll get the prizes to you as soon as we're done here. Suzanne Webster is also with us this afternoon from ATI Mirage, who's going to tell us who the winner is of a training voucher. With so much change happening in the workplace, everyone is looking for flexible, time-effective opportunities to develop and upskill their staff. So whether your team is in the office or working from home, ATI Mirage can provide a real-life interactive training module to build confidence and provide new skills within the business environment. Suzanne, tell us, before you tell us who the winner is, what's the value of this prize?
Thanks, Tim. The value of the prize is up to $1,250, which will cover if someone would like to do a Power BI course. It's a 2-day course. And the winner is David Swadling from Komatsu.
Couldn't have gone to a better home. No, I say that with absolute affection, Dave. Congratulations on winning. Share the tips with me when you're done. Thank you very much, Suzanne, and thank you to ATI Mirage. And once again, folks, would you please join me in thanking our valued sponsors this afternoon, Axis Group International, Paramount Earth Moving, thanks to Sean Tilley, and Dassault Systems, and particularly to our great supporter, Kevin West. Thank you very much for your support this afternoon. And that brings us now to the close of our luncheon for this afternoon. If you would like to continue networking, you can always wander over to the campfield, but just please be aware that if you parked on the Marley lawn, it is locked at 3:30, so don't leave your car in there, or it may be a struggle to get it out if you do planning on settling in at the campfield for this afternoon. I think our 2 hours might be up as well, because as we know, the virus likes to keep an eye on the time. So if you kind of don't want to be anywhere for 2 hours, maybe head over to the campfield sooner rather than later, before that 2-hour window expires. Anyway, I'm not going to go there. But thank you very much for being here this afternoon. On behalf of the WA Mining Club, the President, Natalie Taylor, and the committee, thank you again for your attendance. Good afternoon, and if you're driving, please take care, and we'll see you, fingers crossed, next month. Thank you.